Hello, I'm Joel. I'm the farm manager and one of the growers at Norwich Farm Share, a CSA growing veg and a few herbs for about 130 households. That's as of August 2020. I want to tell you a little bit about why we are aiming to be a regenerative agriculture farm. What does regenerative agriculture mean and why do we farm in that way? I'm in one of our polytunnels here, which is where we grow all of our tomatoes and some peppers. So for me, regenerative agriculture means mainly that we're looking after the soil, that we're building soil, because there are so many problems with soil erosion in the world, and farming is one of the main causes of that. So it's really important that we are farming in a way that builds the soil and looks after it for future generations and for us, because the soil is the lifeblood of our farm and our crops. It's what's going to help us to produce the healthiest crops possible. So one of the things that we do or don't do is use any synthetic chemicals. We don't use any pesticides, we don't use any herbicides, we don't use any fertilizers apart from things like seaweed extract and some feed made from molasses. Why? Well, we just don't know what those pesticides and herbicides can do to all the biology in the soil, in the air, in the area around our farm, and we don't know what they can do to us, and we'd rather not use them because many of them are very poisonous. How do we do without them? Well, again, we aim to have the healthiest soil possible so that our plants, our crops, are as healthy as possible. Because if our crops are healthy, then they shouldn't need any pesticides to kill pests, and they should be able to be disease free. And if they do get disease, then we probably don't want to eat them. So how do we help to build our soil and make it as healthy as possible? So there's a few techniques that we use. One is that we're aiming for no dig. Now you can see a tractor in the background. That's a tractor that Norwich Farm Share bought years ago. We hardly use that apart from for cutting the grass in the far end of the field if it gets too long. But we are aiming for no dig or minimal till, which means we don't use a cultivator to turn over the soil. We have used it in the last couple of years as we're setting up the market garden, but that's only when the beds get really weedy and we need to get the bed clear as quickly as possible. But it's something that we want to stop doing completely in the future. Why? Because when you rotivate the soil, you disturb all the microbiology in there, the fungi, the mycorrhizae, the bacteria. All the living organisms prefer the soil to be undisturbed, and when you break it apart and turn it over, you lose all of that life, or at least you disturb it and destroy some of it. And also, when you turn the soil over, it's likely that you're going to be oxidizing a lot of the organic matter in the soil. It burns up essentially and you lose it. We want to keep organic matter in the soil because organic matter is good for the soil biology. It's good for absorbing water and storing water, so we don't have to do so much irrigation. It's good for providing nutrients to plants. Another thing which is important to us in terms of being a regenerative farm is that we're feeding the soil with natural goodness, which generally is coming from the roots of all these different plants. So plants produce sugars and they push those out through the roots, as well as using them to build tissue. And those sugars feed biology in the soil, whether it's fungi or bacteria. They help those microorganisms to grow. Now there is research coming out which suggests that plants know what nutrients they're missing. They produce certain sugars which attract certain fungi or bacteria, which then break down the minerals to provide the right nutrients to the plant. And so in a way, the plant can manage its own nutrient supply. But you have to have healthy soil for the plant to be able to do that. If there's no biological life in the soil, then the plant's efforts will be in vain if you keep disturbing the soil. So we want to have a wide variety of plants, because all those plants will produce different chemicals, different amounts of different types of sugars that go into the soil. And so you can see, looking around, there is a huge variety of different crops, and we'll move all these crops around as the years go on and have different successions, so that in any one year you might have 2 or 3 or even 4 different crops in a bed, and that's feeding the soil. Another thing that we will do in the future, although we're not doing so much now, is growing green manures. So instead of growing a crop on a bed, which does mean that we're pulling all of that vegetable matter, that organic matter, out of the bed, and some of it will go to our members and they may compost it, they may give it back to us, some of it might go on our compost heap, but we are losing some of that organic matter and those nutrients from the soil. So it's good to put something back, and a green manure is just a plant, sometimes called a cover crop, that you will grow in our beds, and then it will die either by natural the natural cycle as it gets too old and dies back, or we might cover it with a tarpaulin or plastic, or we might crush it by bashing it down with some kind of implement, and then that goes back into the soil and provides nutrients. And also the roots in those cover crops and green manures will also be feeding the soil as well. So there's lots of different ways that we can help our soil to be more healthy, and we're trying to achieve as many of those as possible, although we've only been on this site a couple of years. But hopefully you get the message that regenerative agriculture is a lot more than just being organic, a lot more than just not using chemicals. There's a whole load of techniques which you can use to make your soil healthy, which leads to healthy crops. And those healthy crops we are harvesting pretty much 24 hours before they're sent to our members, and they're incredibly fresh. All those nutrients are still in the plant, and that's what we're aiming to do: provide highly nutritious fresh vegetables to the people of Norwich. And we want to do it in a regenerative way, so this land and this soil is better than it was when we came here.